Broncos Country, today feels like one of those days where something big could be brewing in Denver. And I'm telling you right now, there are two major angles we need to talk about. Because the quarterback room suddenly feels like it could be heading toward a move that changes the way we look at this roster going into the season. First, there's a growing conversation about whether Denver is really comfortable with what it has behind Bo Nix. And when you look at what this team wants to accomplish this year, that question matters a whole lot more than people might think. Because if the Broncos truly believe they can make a serious run in the AFC, they cannot afford to have their entire season hanging by a thread if something happens at quarterback. But then there's the second part of this, and this is where things get really interesting. There are already some very intriguing possibilities being discussed for that QB2 spot, and I have a feeling we could see something happen to give Bo Nix some legitimate help and insurance behind him. One possibility could create absolute chaos around Broncos Country, while the other might actually be the quieter, smarter fit, and when we get into the cost, the football fit, and what each move could do to that locker room, man, there is a lot to unpack today. So before we get into all of it, if you're as locked into this team as I am, hit that like button and subscribe. This channel is still new, and we're chasing our first 1,500 subscribers. I'd love for the people who are here right now to be able to say they were part of this Broncos community from the very beginning. Alright, Broncos Country, now we need to talk about what could be coming at QB2. And now we can finally put the names on this thing, because the debate coming out of the Denver Post from Sean Keeler and Parker Gabriel is a fascinating one. Should the Broncos make a trade for Shedeur Sanders or Joe Milton III to give Bo Nix a stronger backup? And Broncos Country? This is where I think the conversation gets serious. Because right now, the concern is Jarrett Stidham and Sam Ehlinger, and I'm not trying to disrespect either guy. This isn't about pretending they can't play football, but there's a massive difference between saying, yeah, we have backup quarterbacks on the roster, and saying, if Bo Nix misses 3 or 4 games, we still believe we can survive in the AFC. Those are two completely different conversations. Bo Nix is the guy, period. He has become the face of this franchise, and the expectations surrounding Denver are way too high to simply cross our fingers and hope Super Bo stays healthy for all 17 games. Because if you believe this Broncos team can make a real run, then you have to think about the uncomfortable scenario too. What happens if Bo goes down? Can Jarrett Stidham keep this offense moving? Can Sam Ehlinger step into Sean Payton's system and keep Denver winning games against AFC contenders? Maybe? But maybe is a scary word when you're talking about protecting an entire season. And that brings us to the first name that would absolutely set Colorado on fire. Shedeur Sanders. Yeah, imagine that for a second. Shedeur back in Colorado, this time wearing Broncos colors. Sanders obviously already has that connection to the state from his time with the Colorado Buffaloes. And according to this scenario, his situation in Cleveland has opened the door for people to wonder whether Denver should pick up the phone. The argument being presented is that Sanders has been pushed behind. Deshaun Watson with the Cleveland Browns after getting 7 starts during his rookie season in 2025. The numbers cited are around 1,400 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, along with a Pro Bowl selection. Those numbers are obviously mixed. 7 touchdowns against 10 interceptions isn't something I'm going to sit here and pretend is dominant quarterback play. But we're also talking about a young quarterback who has already been thrown into NFL action. And if Denver is looking for somebody behind Bo who potentially has legitimate starter upside, that changes the conversation. And from a football standpoint, I can understand why Shedeur would be intriguing for Sean Payton. Payton's offense asks a quarterback to play with timing. Get the football out, understand what the defense is showing you. Be accurate in the short and intermediate areas. Anticipate instead of constantly relying on backyard football. Those are areas where Sanders' profile becomes interesting. When he's operating within structure and distributing the ball in rhythm, you can see why people would look at him and think, Sean Payton could work with that. But there's a concern too. Shedeur has had that tendency to hold onto the football while trying to create something. And at this level, those extra moments can turn into sacks very quickly. If your protection starts breaking down and your quarterback refuses to give up on a play, suddenly 2nd and 7 becomes 3rd and 15. That matters in Sean Payton's offense, and then there's something even bigger than football with Shedeur: the noise. Broncos Country, you already know what would happen. If Shedeur Sanders comes back to Colorado, he isn't arriving like some anonymous backup quarterback. Every camera is going to be there. Every radio show is going to talk about it. Every bad Bo Nix game suddenly becomes a debate. Bo throws a couple interceptions. Should Denver give Shedeur a chance? The offense struggles for a week. Is it time for Sanders? That's the danger. Because Bo Nix has earned the right to have this be his football team without somebody turning every mistake into a quarterback controversy. And if Denver believes Bo is its franchise quarterback, the front office has to consider whether adding Shedeur makes the quarterback room stronger while potentially making everything around that room louder. Now, let's talk about the other name, Joe Milton III. And this is a completely different type of gamble. Milton has the physical tools that make you sit up when you watch him throw a football. That arm is ridiculous. We're talking about the kind of quarterback who can stretch the field vertically and make throws that immediately change what a defense has to respect. And physically, he gives you another dimension you could potentially build packages around his mobility, use some run-pass options, and take advantage of his size and athletic ability in short yardage situations. If Bo Nix had to miss some time, Milton could at least give Sean Payton tools to work with. But Milton isn't Bo Nix. And Denver couldn't simply pretend nothing changed. His consistency and precision are still the questions. Sean Payton wants control, timing, accuracy, getting the offense into the correct situation, and keeping everything on schedule. That's where Milton would still need refinement. So you've basically got two completely different ideas here. With Shedeur Sanders, you're looking at a young quarterback with experience, accuracy, and potential starter qualities who might fit certain principles of Payton's system, but who comes with a much bigger spotlight. With Joe Milton III, you're betting more heavily on raw physical talent and development while bringing in somebody who could probably settle into the backup role without immediately creating a political battle around Bo Nix. And then we get to the part that might ultimately decide everything: the price. Because Denver isn't just choosing between quarterbacks here, Denver would potentially be choosing between quarterback insurance and future roster flexibility. The estimated compensation discussed for Sanders is around a third or fourth round draft pick. For Milton, you're potentially talking more in the neighborhood of a 5th through 7th round selection. That difference matters. A 3rd round pick can become a legitimate starter. A 4th round pick can become an important rotational player. And Denver still has other areas where future resources matter, including defensive line depth and wide receiver. So if I'm sitting in that Broncos front office, I'm asking myself one question over and over. How much am I willing to pay for insurance? Because that's ultimately what this is. If Bo Nix stays healthy and plays the entire season, hopefully your QB2 barely sees the field. Then suddenly, people are asking why you surrendered meaningful draft capital for a player standing on the sideline. But if Bo gets hurt in November and Denver is fighting for playoff positioning, that same trade could save your season. That's why this decision is so difficult. And financially, both possibilities have some appeal, because we're talking about young quarterbacks on rookie contracts. But Sanders potentially comes with a different long-term question if he develops into the player people believe he can become. Eventually, you're dealing with future contract expectations, and a quarterback who may understandably want an opportunity to start. Milton is a different situation. His contract profile would be cheaper, and his role would be much clearer. Develop behind Bo, learn Sean Payton's offense. Be ready if your number gets called. And I think that locker room dynamic matters more than people realize. Sometimes the best backup quarterback isn't simply the most talented guy available. It's the quarterback who can prepare like a starter without making your actual starter look over his shoulder every Sunday. That's where Milton might have an advantage. But Denver doesn't necessarily have to make either trade. There are really 3 paths here. The Broncos could wait until final roster cuts, when teams trim down to 53 players and see whether an experienced veteran becomes available. That would potentially allow Denver to strengthen the room without sacrificing valuable draft capital. They could also stay with Jarrett Stidham as the number 2 and Sam Ehlinger in the room, trusting what they already have. If Stidham had to play, Sean Payton could simplify things. Lean harder on the running game. Use more quick throws and ask the backup quarterback to manage the offense rather than trying to become Bo Nix. And then there's option number 3. Make the aggressive move. Call Cleveland and see exactly what it would take to get Shedeur Sanders. But for me, that conversation only becomes really attractive if the price comes down. If Cleveland is willing to accept minimal compensation and Denver believes Sanders can handle being Bo's backup without turning every Sunday into a referendum on the starting quarterback, then you listen. Absolutely. But giving away premium draft capital just because the name is exciting? That's where I get nervous. And the same principle applies to Joe Milton III. If you can acquire Milton for a late-round pick and Sean Payton genuinely believes he can develop him, that feels like a much easier gamble to justify. Because there's another important point here. Denver should not be searching for somebody to replace Bo Nix. They should be searching for somebody who can protect what Bo Nix and this team are trying to build. That distinction is everything. I don't want a quarterback controversy. I don't want Broncos Country spending every Monday arguing about whether Bo should be benched because he had one rough afternoon. I want depth. I want insurance. And I want Sean Payton to have somebody he trusts if the worst-case scenario happens. Because Denver has reached the point where expectations matter again. When you're rebuilding, you can survive having questionable depth. When you believe you can compete deep into January, those weaknesses become dangerous. And that's what this entire conversation tells me about where the Broncos are right now. People are discussing the backup quarterback because the expectations for the starting quarterback and for this entire team have changed. Bo Nix is carrying real expectations now. Sean Payton is carrying real expectations. And the front office is going to be judged on whether it built enough depth around this roster to survive the things that inevitably happen during an NFL season. Personally, if the choice is between overpaying for a big name and patiently waiting for the right opportunity, I'm staying patient. But if Joe Milton III can be had cheaply, I'm making that phone call. And if Cleveland suddenly lowers the price on Shedeur Sanders, then I'm definitely listening. Because the worst time to realize you needed a legitimate QB2 is after Bo Nix is already unavailable. And Broncos Country, I really want to know where you stand on this one. Would you bring Shedeur Sanders back to Colorado and deal with all the attention that comes with him? Would you rather take the cheaper developmental gamble on Joe Milton III? Or are you completely comfortable entering the season with Jarrett Stidham and Sam Ehlinger behind Bo Nix? Drop your answer in the comments because I think Broncos fans are going to be seriously divided on this one. And if you enjoyed talking Broncos football without all the corporate nonsense, hit the like button and subscribe to Eagles Insider Daily. The channel is still new. We're building this community one fan at a time, and our first goal is 1,500 subscribers. If you're here early, you're part of building this thing from the ground up. Now we wait to see whether Denver actually makes that phone call. Because protecting Bo Nix doesn't only mean protecting the quarterback. It might mean protecting the entire season.